All right. Hey everybody, this is going to be a video to try and get us set up with Reaper super fast. So, this is a brand new install. I've put it on a portable drive because I didn't want to mess with my own personal one, but perfect. So this should be what you see. This is on a Mac, very similar looking though, probably for Windows. So, you have not selected an audio device. Would you like to select your audio device driver now? Recommended. I will say this from the get-go. The pop-ups in some applications, not useful. In Reaper, they actually are, so don't get into the habit of clicking out of them before you read them because they'll probably help you. So, yes, I would like to set that up. Why, thank you for asking. I do have an actual license, but for right now, because this is a new one, I'll just say still evaluating. All right, cool. So it brings us to the device page in our Reaper preferences for us because we hit yes. Usually you want to be really explicit here. Instead of using the default system devices, I would actually find your audio interface here. I have the Apollo Twin, but if you have the Scarlett, the Audient, whatever it is, just find it in this drop-down list and select it. Cool. That should be pretty much all you need to do. It's going to change your input and output to kind of look at that. So go ahead and hit apply there. Cool. So we'll do other stuff in these settings later, but for right now, we're just going to let everything else be default. And hit OK. All right, so this is what it looks like. Really confusing. I know. There's just a lot to look at. But we're going to make it so it's a little bit more intuitive to look at here. I'm just making everything a little bigger. First of all, when I show you these things, just know at the end we're going to save a template, and then you'll never have to set these up again unless you're on a new computer. First of all, there's not a track to record. So if you hit record down here, which you might intuitively find, you're like, hey, look, if I hover over it, it says record, Command R. I hit it. Hey, record warning, no tracks, and nothing's armed for recording. You can continue, but nothing will be recorded until you record arm a track. Okay, so let me cancel out of this. It's telling me something important. So I need to add a track. I don't have a track. If I go to track, insert new track, or just double click over here in this big void, it'll add a track for me. Perfect. So now I should be able to record. Let's try it again. No tracks are armed for recording. So there's a track now, so it's not giving me the warning that there's no track, but nothing's armed. Okay. So let me hit arm. You're right, you're going to hear me twice now because what happens is my audio interface already lets me monitor. So if I have this allowing the system monitor, you're going to hear me twice. So this sounds gross. What you'll do is you'll hover over this little speaker icon right next to where it's armed. So this is how you arm it. This is how you turn monitoring on or off. So if I click it, and I hover over it's on auto, I don't want that either. I want it on off. There we go. So now you should only hear me once. Perfect. So what's going to happen now is it should let me record. So let's try that. Hi, I'm recording. Perfect. I'm recording. I want to keep recording. So I can either stop recording by hitting this again, or I can hit the space bar, or I can use hotkeys. But for right now, we'll just assume that that's good to go. All right, so the problem is then, hey Jen, how do you punch and roll? I'd be happy to tell you. So how you punch and roll is as such. You set your monitor, your cursor, and you see how I can't click in the middle of anything? That's because something called snapping is on. So now we're going to turn that off, and I knew that was going to happen, but I also wanted to show you it happening. So the way to do most things that we're going to do is in options or actions. But for right now in settings, we're going to go into options a bunch. So in options, I'm going to scroll down to where it says snap grid, and I'm going to do two things here. I'm going to turn enable snapping off by checking it. Then I'm going to go back into options, back down to snap grid, and then I'm going to uncheck show grid just because I like a cleaner view. You can keep it on if you'd like. Sometimes for editing it's nice to kind of visualize how long the break between sentences is, etc. But for recording, I usually like to have it off. Clean view. Awesome. Now, if you use your scroll wheel, you'll see that it zooms by default. And if you hold down Shift and scroll, you'll see that it moves your timeline for you. You can change that in the settings later, but for right now, get used to using your scroll wheel to zoom and then Shift and scroll wheel to move your timeline around. Awesome. So next thing is I actually don't like having beats because this is for music. You would use like beats and measures for visuals. What I'm going to do instead is right click in this ruler up here, which is what this is right here. If I right click on it or control click if you don't have a right click button or command click, then it'll give me this menu. And down here, I can select minutes, seconds. Cool, now I can actually see like, oh, this is 4 seconds in, 6 seconds in, perfect. And this changes down here for me. Excellent. I also don't like having so much real estate space taken up for this because I already have it here. So for right now, I'm going to show you this. Anything that's down here, docked down here, if you will, is in the docker. So if I want to see this or hide this, I can just go to View, Docker. And now it's gone. And then just to kind of give you information on what you're looking at down here, this is the transport bar. So shows you your time, shows you stop, rewind, go to the beginning, etc. And then if you're stopped or played, what your spot is, basically time selection wise. So useful information. So, but I can also hide that under this menu. So I can view transport. If I can't see it and I want it, I can just go back to view and transport again, and there it is. But I like having it up. Cool, so now I'm gonna try and punch in and start recording. Now you can see I can get literally, oops, double clicked by accident. I can get literally anywhere I wanna go, hit record. It doesn't give me a pre-roll, but it does record for me, so that's helpful. So I stop. So there's a couple of interesting things here. Every time, if you don't do this next step, it's going to pop up and say like, hey, do you want to save these things? And you probably do, but you don't want to be annoyed while you're in the middle of the zone of recording. So uncheck on stop. You can hit save all for now, and we'll show you how to save. Just get used to hitting Command S a bunch. All right, Jen, why does this look so weird? So some people like this because it shows you, hey, this was my old take, how I recorded it originally, my new take. I don't like it, and most people will put it in tape mode, means it just records over. So I'll show you how to do that. First, if you forget to do this step, let me show you how to fix this. You right click on the new take and then go to takes. And then you go to crop to active take. I'll randomly sing for no reason in this, but if you crop to active take, then it just keeps the new one, and because they were overlapping, it did it for the original too. So we'll go to take and crop to active take. And I literally just right-clicked on the one that I wanted to keep. So the original and then the second one I recorded. Cool. So the way to fix that so it doesn't happen like that all the time is to go to Options and then New Recording that overlaps existing media. Instead of splitting the existing item and creating a new take, which is the default, we actually want it to trim behind the existing one. It still is there, it's just not going to be visible at the same time. So let's do tape mode. So that means when I put my browser back down and hit record, it will now just record over it. And when I stop, it'll just be in a line. Perfect. That's what we want. Now, I'm not getting pre-roll right now, which is awful. So what I'm going to do is show you where to turn that on. So once again, this is for music, so you might see some random music terms like metronome/pre-roll settings. So we don't want the metronome part, but we do want the pre-roll settings, so we'll click here. Awesome. We can ignore most of the stuff on this screen and just come right down here to where it says pre-roll. And we want to pre-roll before recording. Now, this is measures. It's a music thing. So there's beats per minute. There's measures is a certain amount depending on your time signature. So there's a little bit of calculation that goes into this, but this is getting you started up fast. So while we could change that, we're going to leave it at default. Just know you can put decimals here. So if 2's too long, you can always just do 1.5, etc. Just play with it by ear. But yeah, we'll just leave it at the default and close out of that. So now if I go here and click down here or hit Command R or a different hotkey that we'll set up later, I can record. It doesn't give me a pre-roll, but it does record for me. And now it gives me a pre-roll. Fantastic, I'm doing good. So great, now we have a pre-roll. Now we're recording so it stays in one line and we are ready to start recording. What I'm going to do is Command A or Control A, or alternatively, you can double click on this like blank spot and select everything on that track. And I'm just going to delete. You might have to set this up differently. So to delete, you can hit Command X or cut items by right clicking on one of the items when they're all selected. And we can change this in a minute as well. But for right now, right click and cut items. Perfect. And then I just want to make sure that my cursor is at the beginning every time I start a project. So down here, I'm going to click this little rewind with an arrow button. Rewind, it looks like a rewind, but basically it's just the way to go to the start of the project. Cool. So now my cursor's in the right place. My track is armed, so it's ready to record right away. And so if I needed to, this would be enough for me to get started recording. So I'm going to save this as a project template, and you can have more than one of these. So if you like it a certain way, if you do other types of VOs, you can save 2 different project templates, etc. But for now, what you'll do is hit File, and then Project Templates, and then Save Project as Template. And you can name it literally whatever. I'll just call it Starter Project. Great. So now, if I wanted this to be my default every time I start it up, because right now if I go to File, New Project, or New Project tab does the same thing, it looks the old way, and I don't want it to look the old way. I want it to look like this, like the pretty setup that I walked you through. The way to do that is actually in your settings. So for both Reaper preferences for Mac, but also under Options, on the very bottom, you'll have preferences there as well. So Options, Preferences, open that window. And then on the left-hand side here, if you're scrolled down, you might have to scroll back up. You're going to see Project. And there, the first line says, when creating new projects, use the following project file as a template. So this is where you determine what that initial setting looks like. So Browse, Starter Project. It opens up to your project templates folder by default. That's why you don't change that when it comes to it. Just save it in the project template section and hit Open. Now it's going to, where the starter project is, it's going to know that, and it's going to use that every time. So apply, hit OK. So now every time I hit File, New Project tab, it's going to look like the thing we just set up. So File, I'll just do new project, no saving for now. Great, this is exactly what we want. It's going to look like this every time, and I can start recording. And honestly, that's enough. This will get you to the point where you could record what you needed to record like you do in most other environments. Now you just need to know to hit record, it'll count down for when the pre-roll happens, then it'll say recording, and now you're recording, and then you can record, hit the space bar to stop, place your cursor, and hit Command R or hit record. And then you'll hear the pre-roll happens, then it'll say recording, and now you're recording, and I'm still recording, etc., and life is good, and now I can record a whole book. Maybe not a whole book, but this will get you started. Now, the other things to be aware of is how to render it. So mix down, render, save as, all of those things mean almost the exact same thing. So first of all, I'm going to double click again over here in this area, or Control A, Command A to select all the files. Right click and cut items just to clear them out again. And rewind to the beginning. And once I have it looking like this, I'm going to talk briefly about the render screen. There is a lot that goes into render, but right now we're going to assume every chapter is on its new project. So we're going to set this up so all you have to do is basically hit the render button and ignore this for a little bit. So, File, Render. This window comes up and it looks intimidating. I get it. Master mix and entire project. Those are fine. Later on, you'll deal with stems or selected media items, etc. But for right now, source, master mix. That'll work great for you. Entire project means it's going to go from 0 to wherever that recorded items ends. So that's why it's good to use for a single chapter, so that you don't have to deal with regions or markers or any of the other buzzwords you might have heard around town. Cool. So we'll do entire project. Second line, we don't need to change much except uncheck this tail. It's going to put a second, 1000 milliseconds, a second of just empty stuff at the end of your file. No matter how long it is, it's just going to add a second of nothing. Great for music, horrible for what we do. The next is, I actually think you should set a project folder where it always saves to by default, and you can always come in here and change it on a project by project basis. But this will at least get you a place where it'll just save if you forget. So browse for directory, and you're just going to find a place where you like to save stuff. I'll just go to my backup drive, start a new folder. You could put this basically anywhere, and documents is great. Reaper renders 2.0 because I already have one that I actually use. But once you have a folder set up, I think you can handle that. It's going to be open to that. You hit open, and it will now always send to there. You can also use other types like relative paths, etc., meaning that it's based on whatever folder you're in. But for now, let's set it to a regular, good old-fashioned defined folder, which this is. Now, file name. What I like to do here is be a little sneaky and use a wildcard. What a wildcard is it'll use information that you've set up for the project and make that the name of whatever your printout is. So you hit wildcard and you hit project information. And I'm going to use project here. There's obviously tons of other ways you can do that. But if you hit project, it's going to use the name that you save this project as what it will title the WAV file as. Now, speaking of WAV file, we're going to keep going down here. For right now, it's, just follow along and it can be changed and adapted later, but for now, we're just going to keep it like that. We want it to be typically in mono, so change the channels to mono. And down here, usually we want to render to waves, so we'll do that. Typically, 16-bit under wave bit depth is what they request, but if they want something higher, you can always change it here, but let's assume 16. And everything else will keep the same. Later on, you might want to include markers or regions if you use those, but for now, we'll just keep it like this. Perfect. So this will be what we want every time. Hit apply and cancel or close out of this. Great. So now we're going to save over that project template so it has the renders as well in there. So File, Project Template, save project as template like we did before. And we're making sure that everything's deleted out and the cursor's at the beginning before we do this, which I did before we did the render screen. And we're just going to click on Starter Project so you don't have to type it again. And then hit Save and Replace when it asks. Cool. So now, every time I open a new project, no, we don't care about saving, it's going to have in render all of those settings already done for us. So we could just render the file when we're done recording. So a brief bonus is show you how to do that with the most recent settings. So what you'll do is you'll just ignore basically all of this. You'll file render and then just hit render when it's recorded and it'll spit it out for you. Later on, when you install SWS, you'll see some of those buzzwords float around. You might select set up an action that will use your recent settings, but for now, that's the quickest way to do it. So this is pretty much all you'll need to really get started recording. There's additional stuff that we'll add in that will allow you to be a little bit more specific with what hotkeys you use and those type of things. But for now, this will get you started, ready to go, and now let's get recording.